On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, coach firings and heartbreak all across the NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happening, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, I'll admit it. I've got a little bit of a competitive side, and that competitive piece of my personality is an absolute fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. I was literally playing it 5 minutes ago. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we'll discuss the stunner in Seattle as Dave Hakstol has been relieved of his duties. The Seattle Kraken feeling the need to make a change. We'll talk about what led to the decision to let go of one of the longest tenured coaches in the NHL. No, I'm not kidding. We'll talk about that too. We'll also discuss the meltdown in Nashville, the heartbreak, 2 goals in less than 3 minutes to get the game to overtime, and then Vancouver wins it with a game winner in OT. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about my incredibly absurd prediction that the Winnipeg Jets were going to take care of business against the Colorado Avalanche. Yeah, that worked out great. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, one half of the dynamic duo here on your Western Conference Tuesday, joined as always by Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. Nick, we're going to conserve as much of your voice as we can. So just give me a thumbs up if you have recovered from the loss to Vancouver on Sunday.
What's the opposite of a thumbs up?
No thumb at all.
Yeah. I'll respectively remain silent then.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that game here in a little bit, but we were putting the episode together for today, and big news out of Seattle. Honestly, this shocked me. Dave Hakstol has been let go. He's been relieved of his duties by the Seattle Kraken. Ron Francis saying in a statement that after having the exit interviews and talking about the general direction of the team, felt like there was a need to go in a different direction. And so Hakstol ends up being relieved of his duties. Crazy that because there have been so many coaches that have been fired this season that Hakstol was he was in the top 10 in terms of tenured coaches, and he has been around as long as the Seattle Kraken have been around, which is not long. So what did you think, Nick, of this? We'll look at some of the numbers that led to Seattle taking a huge step back, but what did you think first and foremost of the decision to let Dave Hakstol go?
I'm with you. Like it was a big surprise to me. Obviously the Kraken took a big step back this year after the playoffs last year, but this is a guy that came in and took an expansion team to the second round of the playoffs, beating the defending Stanley Cup champions in the process in just their second year. And I know like the Kraken are getting more help than the Atlanta Thrashers or Nashville Predators or Minnesota Wild did back in our day. So maybe there's a little bit more expectation there. But this seems like, and this is becoming a trend, Seth, because we saw it, 5 years ago when Gerard Gallant took Vegas to the Stanley Cup final in year 1. Year 2, they made the playoffs, eliminated in round 1, and then Gallant got fired. To me, this is just it's showing that teams. It feels like there's less patience now, and a little bit understanding. And there's not this sense of, okay, we're going to give you 5 years to build this team, or we're going to give you, we know we're a work in progress, but we're going to help you out wherever you can. Just try to develop the players. It's very much a, kind of like SEC football, where it's like, if you come in, you better be winning in 3 years, or you're not going to be the coach, because we don't have patience for this long, slow build. We need somebody to win right now. And I'm kind of surprised that Ron Francis and the Kraken did that in this case.
Yeah, it speaks to a couple of things for me. Number one, it speaks to honestly, the timing I don't think is a coincidence, considering the news that we got last week that the Ottawa Senators were starting to circle in on some finalists for their job. I don't feel like that's coincidental in timing. Is that, okay, Ottawa's starting to kind of get something figured out for their head coach. And so Seattle has maybe identified somebody that is available that they think would be an immediate fit. Craig Berube, Dean Evason, who's like here. And here's the other like follow-up to that question is, do you view those guys as like immediately better? Like in the case of Berube, probably, but how long are you going to commit to him to being your head coach? That's probably a couple of years, maybe 3 tops. Like it just seems weird, considering it felt like the team was building some chemistry and was really starting to kind of buy in late in the season. And now to all of a sudden go this route. But you look at it, 100 points for Seattle last season, 46, 28, and 8. They were plus 33 in the goals department, 289 scored, 256 allowed. And then you go to this season, and Seattle was 34, 35, and 13. Those 13 overtime losses were the most in the Western Conference, and were third to the New York Islanders and Montreal. Both had 16. Boston had 15, and then the Kraken with 13 were, I guess that would be fourth. And then you look at in goals, they go from 289 to 217. And they did give up fewer goals, but their goal differential was minus 19 on the season. And so you want to try to be stacking momentum and moving uphill, pushing the boulder uphill. And it seemed like Seattle took a massive step back this season, pretty much across the board. Offense, defense, goaltending, special teams, like you name it, there was regression in it, which is probably another huge reason as to why this decision came about.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Matty Beniers didn't have his best season. Some other key players for them haven't necessarily had their best seasons this year either. Burakovsky was absolutely trash when he was healthy. I mean, that's got to be part of it. The other reason you kind of tease it, Seth, is I just wonder if Ron Francis has somebody in mind.
Yeah.
Already. This is like the Nashville Predators firing John Hines last year, and then 4 hours later announcing the hiring of Andrew Burnett. This feels like maybe Ron Francis has a beat on a guy, knows like this is somebody that I think is going to be a really good fit for what we want to do as a team. I've worked with him before. I don't know who that might be. I am just going to throw out the name Carl Taylor, Milwaukee Admirals head coach, kind of a rising star in the Predators organization. I think a lot of Predators fans saw him maybe as a future head coach. He's, I think, being linked to some NHL jobs. As you mentioned, Ron Francis has some familiarity with some other guys in the market, Dean Evason, namely. So there are some people out there that I think not Ron Hextall, Ron Francis, two different Rons, that Ron Francis maybe has in mind.
Well, and Michael Russo has thrown out there that he feels like Dean Evason is a very solid fit for Seattle because of that history. And so maybe because Evason is one of the finalists in Ottawa. So maybe Seattle is trying to get themselves in position to try to woo him away from the Senators, and playing that kind of physical defensive style of hockey that really grinded out, kind of grit and grind. That feels pretty apropos for what Seattle's trying to do.
For sure. Do you think Seattle wants to play that style of hockey though? Or like the sort of grind it out, Minnesota Wild style of play? Or do you think they want to kind of get more, fast, maybe use kind of build around Beniers, maybe get Shane Wright up and maybe use some of that speed and skill? Because if that's the case, maybe this isn't a best Dean Evason fit.
Well, normal logic would tell you that teams should be gravitating towards playing with speed and skill. But I'm here to tell you there are teams that have decided that that's just not the operative route to go. One of them being right here. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I do think that Seattle certainly has the pieces to where they would maybe want to try to optimize some of that speed or skill. Maybe they'll take John Hines.
Speaking of not making optimal decision.
We're not going to go down that road because I'm not in any shape to beleaguer that point. If anybody wants that point to be fully beleaguered, go to Locked on Wild because we're going to go into that this week. So it will be fascinating to see which routes the Seattle Kraken go for their next head coach. On a smaller scale, it will be fascinating to see how the Nashville Predators, what route they go in trying to bounce back from a heartbreaking loss to the Vancouver Canucks. A 2-goal lead with less than 3 minutes to play. And Vancouver says, not today. We'll talk about it next here on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. Just put my phone down. I was trying to get a bonus roll the dice because running low on spins. And so I was trying to accomplish to finish up a couple of mini games so I could get, I had a mini game I completed earlier today where I got 1,000 free rolls of the dice. That's just part of the intrigue of Monopoly Go, which captures all of your favorite parts of the Monopoly classic we all grew up with as kids, whether it be around the Thanksgiving table, at Christmas, whenever. You can find every bit of the nostalgia by playing Monopoly Go. You can also team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. Just like in The Price is Right, you drop in the coin and it bounces around the board and then you get a prize. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now. Free on the Google Play or App Store. I promise you will not regret it. So go get Monopoly Go now. Welcome to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Seth Toupal joined by Nick Morgan. All right, Nick, This is a safe space. This is a therapy session. The Nashville Predators had a 2-goal lead with under 3 minutes to play.
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
The best players on the Nashville Predators sucked. That's what happened. Yeah, I mean, that's the most jarring thing about what happened in that game 4 collapse for the Nashville Predators, Seth, is you look at who was on the ice for pretty much every goal. Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, Gustav Nyquist, Ryan McDonough, guys that you put on the ice in this situation to make that last play. And the Canucks scored, all 3 goals, the 2 empty netters, both Brock Besser goals, or the 2 goals with the empty net, I should say, and the Elias Lindholm game-winning goal. Both of those, all of them happened on bad defensive breakdowns by, what should have been some of the Predators' A-game players. And even before that, like the lead up to the goals, we saw a botched clear by Roman Josi. We saw a botched clear by Philip Forsberg. Just a lot of carelessness in the last 3 minutes of the game when you had a chance to send the series back to Vancouver tied right down the middle 2-2. And, the most frustrating thing about this, Seth, is that when you look at each game by game, I think it's safe to say the Nashville Predators were the better team in every game except one, which ironically is the one game in this series they've won. And that's the thing, is games 3 and 4, if you just look at the gameplay, like take out the last 3 minutes of game 4. Nashville Predators, if you just play that tape, you would be absolutely thrilled with how you looked against the Vancouver Canucks. And that to me is the biggest stick in my craw right now, is that the Nashville Predators look like they're going to lose this series in a series in which they should conceivably be winning right now. And it's funny because they have a chance tonight to lose in 5 games to the Vancouver Canucks, despite outplaying the Canucks in most of those games. So that's, to me, that's the most frustrating thing in this series. It's not just the fact that the Predators epically collapsed in game 4, which, by the way, stop here. Kudos to Vancouver, because they have absolutely found a way to win these past 2 games. They've had some absolutely great performances by some guys that needed to step up. But that's been the most frustrating in the series, is this could easily be 3-1 Nashville right now, the way they've been playing, and instead they may lose in 5 games tonight.
Well, and the other part of this too that is astounding is you look at the things that have gone wrong for Vancouver in this series. They lost Thatcher Demko, likely for the postseason. Like he is very likely done for the playoffs. Then you lose Casey DeSmith, and he is done for the rest of round 1. Beyond that, who knows? So you're on your 3rd string goalie, and you have not gotten really anything from Elias Pettersson in this series. That alone would be enough to sink most teams. And so it really feels like, going back to the old adage, if you're able to knock a giant down, you got to make sure that you keep them down. Like if you get one of these heavy hitters, these heavy hitting teams on the ropes, like a legit contender, if you get them on the ropes, you got to knock them down, and you got to make sure then that they don't get back up. If you give them even an inch of breathing room, they're going to take it and they're going to beat you. And that's just like, it is amazing the difference going into a road environment up 3-1 or down 3-1 versus tied 2-2. Like, it is a massive difference, not only in like confidence, but the mental games too. Like all of a sudden now you are in a situation where, well, because we crumbled there at the end. Now our season could be done unless we find a way to steal one here. So it's like it just means everything, and that's why it's so important if you have an opportunity to put a team away that you do it.
It's the mountain and the viper from Game of Thrones. Oberyn Martell had the mountain down. He had him beat, and then he just took his eye off of him. He lost his focus for 1 second. The mountain just kicked his legs out, smashed his head to the ground, just squeezed his eyeballs out of his head. That's what happened to the Nashville Predators. They lost their focus for 1 second in this game. In that last 3-minute sequence, they completely sort of forgot who they were, their worst stretch of the game. And Vancouver, a team with Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, Elias Lindholm, all of these great players, they're too good to not take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And that to me is the kryptonite. And I have to say, if you're Nashville, and I said this in Locked On Predators this morning, everything on paper is telling me that Vancouver's going to win this series tonight. That Vancouver crowd is just too good.
Yeah.
Like the crowd is too wild. The players are going to feed off it. That is a tough loss to come back from if you're Nashville. But if there's one team in the NHL that does their best when they're counted out, I will say it's the Nashville Predators. I thought they were dead in the water in December, and then they put some good games together. I thought that they were going to tear this team apart when they lost 9-2 to the Dallas Stars. The very next game was the start of their 18-game point streak. So if there is a team capable of fighting back, going from the depths of hell and rising up to be a contender to get this series back on track, it's the Nashville Predators.
You got me ready to run through a brick wall now. Like we are in full battle mode here. There is definitely a chance that Nashville can come back and make this a series. I am pretty confident, however, in saying that one series I was super confident was going the other way is going to go the complete opposite way. And I feel pretty confident in saying that I think the ride is up for the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk about that to finish today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast after this. Today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. It is playoff time. We are just about through round one in the NBA and NHL playoffs. Major League Baseball is rolling through their season, and there are no shortage of ways that you can bet on every single game courtesy of FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. All you have to do is bet, and you will get $150 in bonus bets to use on round two of the Stanley Cup playoffs. You can go bet against whoever the Colorado Rockies are playing, because I guarantee it's a pretty good chance that Colorado is going to lose that game. No shortage of options at FanDuel. So make sure that you are betting on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks. Anthony Edwards is going to put somebody else on a poster before you can blink. All on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. One final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Seth Toupal and Nick Morgan finishing things up. And Nick, I was emphatic that the Colorado Avalanche had lost their mojo. The vibes were dead. This was Winnipeg's chance to come away with a win against the Avs. They swung home ice advantage in their favor and they were going to be able to take care of business. But no, the Colorado Avalanche came storming back and now have the Jets on the brink. And of all of the calls that I have had in predictions, that might be my worst, because I was so confident, and it came down to Connor Hellebuyck. And guess what? Guess who's been pulled from more games in the series? Connor Hellebuyck.
I think after game one, when we did this last week, and Winnipeg won that game 7-6, I said that was a missed opportunity for Colorado. Because I said, I don't think you're getting 6 goals past Connor Hellebuyck again. Like, he's too good of a goalie to go out and have that same type of rough performance. Like, that was kind of your chance. Since I said that, Connor Hellebuyck has given up 5 goals, 6 goals, and 5 goals in the 3 preceding games. And this time, Colorado actually did get the goaltending to keep Winnipeg off the board. It also helps that Colorado has just outplayed Winnipeg in pretty much every game since then. Just, absolutely bombarding the Winnipeg net with shots, just relentless pressure. And I think a lot of the, we talked about this before the playoffs started too. A lot of the vibes in Colorado weren't good. A lot of people were saying it's like, oh, this is, the team it's not good enough. It's not deep enough. We didn't do enough of the deadline, this and that. And you and I kind of said, like, it's still the Colorado Avalanche. And now we're seeing the Colorado Avalanche. McKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen have just been too good. And the thing that I think is really starting to help the Avs is that depth is also starting to show up in this series as well. They're getting good contributions from guys like, Val Nichushkin, Arturi Lehkonen, Casey Middlestad, I think is really starting to finally settle in to his role on the team a little bit. So it's coming from everywhere for Colorado. And that's been the big thing. But yeah, Seth, I mean, we talk about maybe the Nashville Predators and Vancouver Canucks series looking like it might be over after that Game 4 collapse. I don't see any path for the Winnipeg Jets to get back in this series at all.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different players have scored for the Avalanche in the 4 games. And listen to these names. Cale Makar, 2 goals in 4 games. Arturi Lehkonen has 4 goals in 4 games. Nathan McKinnon has 2 goals in 4 games. Valeri Nichushkin, 6 goals in 4 games. Casey Middlestad, Josh Manson, Devon Taves, Ross Colton, Zach Parise, Miles Wood have scored the other goals, and Parise and Wood have scored twice each. Zach Parise with 2 goals in the 4 games so far. You want to talk about up and down the lineup depth, like you mentioned. It has just been it has been lopsided. Like the top level guys, the Makars and the McKinnons, have absolutely carried their weight, but the supporting cast has just been so good. And if you flip it to the Winnipeg side of things through these games, I'm just going to pull up their stats and look at what we've seen for them. Here are the players that have scored for Winnipeg: Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor and Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry. They have 2 goals apiece. So 2, 4, 6, 8 goals right there. Those are your top guys. Beyond that, you have a goal from David Gustafson, excuse me. 1 goal from him. You've got 1 goal from Vladislav Nemesnikov. You've got 1 goal from Nate Schmidt, and you've got 1 goal from Tyler Toffoli. 12 goals in 4 games, and 8 of them have come from 4 different guys. Like, it's the depth. The depth has just demolished the Winnipeg Jets in this series. Yeah.
I mean, and it's what Colorado does best. And they're starting to look like the Avs from 2022, where it's just the relentless pressure from everywhere up and down the lineup, where, hey, you survived a shift without Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar on the ice. Cool. Here comes Val Nichushkin, who, has been, a juggernaut. Here comes Arturi Lehkonen, who scored 2 points this past game. Heck, here comes, Yakov Trenin, Miles Wood, and Ross Colton, who have each, had a history of, scoring clutch goals down the stretch in games before. Here comes Zach Parise, a guy with Stanley Cup Finals experience, a veteran in this league who's having, an underrated great year. So, look, I don't think Colorado is as good as that 2022 team. I don't think a lot of teams in the NHL are as good as that 2022 Colorado team.
Yeah.
But the same sort of vibe is there right now.
For sure.
Where it's just relentless pressure all the way up and down the ice, all the way up and down the lineup. And they just don't give teams a break because they're so deep.
Honestly, the game one loss was probably exactly what needed to happen for the Avs to refocus them and show them that unless you're playing up to the standard that is set for a franchise like the Colorado Avalanche, if you put in less than that standard, you're going to get run off the ice. And so I think that served as a good wake-up call because, boy, the 3 games after that have been just completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? This Dallas series is looking kind of wild, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of starting to look like the Avalanche might be a cup favorite.
It's beginning to look a lot like Vegas and Colorado. That's as far down the Christmas song route I am comfortable going at this point, but
good try.
Congratulations to my brain on trying to talk myself into any reason that the Winnipeg Jets would be able to beat the Colorado Avalanche, because that worked out great. Yeah. Having a great time with that one. So we'll keep an eye on the postseason in the West. We'll also keep an eye on these coaching vacancies. There are a lot that need filling. There will be more that need filling after the postseason is done, and there will be many teams who decide maybe we're going to go in a different direction than the interim guy that we hired. So there's a lot to keep an eye on, but of course, Locked On NHL has you covered every single day with new episodes from our wide array of hosts throughout the week, whether it be at large NHL coverage, Western Conference Tuesday, Eastern Conference Wednesday, Power Rankings Thursday. We've got you covered every single day of the week with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.